end. But thank you all so much for joining me today. It's really a pleasure to be both a partner of IACBE and feel like I'm part of the team by delivering the live case competition. And so for those of you who aren't familiar with CapSource, we are an organization that focuses on helping schools build and scale their experiential learning programs. So the first question that I often get is kind of, what's the mission? What's the purpose? And I think to that we always answer to bridge the skills gap. And I think it's pretty urgent. I think the skills gap is something that is becoming more and more of an issue for the colleges and organizations that hire students coming out of school. And the way that we look at measuring the skills gap is based on these simple three statistics. So one from NACE, I know they were originally supposed to be part of the session here today, but basically 70% of students expect to enter the workforce upon graduation, but 2/3 of students don't feel prepared to enter the workforce. So it almost seems as though every student who's planning to enter the workforce doesn't feel prepared to enter the workforce, which is a pretty alarming stat. And I think that to really nail that in, the employers agree and think that the students aren't prepared. They don't strongly believe that students have the skills needed to succeed from day one on the job. And so it got us to really reflect, like, what is really going on here? Why are students graduating feeling frustrated, in debt, and almost disinterested at this point? I think there's recent surveys that have come out that said Gen Z is planning more and more now than ever to take a gap year and wait to enroll in their fall programs, especially because of the COVID pandemic. And it's been a trend that's been increasing more and more because the students are really not met with what they need. So what we've done is really began to think a lot about what it means to be an educator in the 21st century, what it means to be a student in the 21st century, and more importantly, what materials and resources educators need in order for classes to be engaging and experiential. And so what we thought is, well, the solution has to be experiential learning. And then it got us thinking, okay, well, what is the difference between experiential learning and traditional learning? All learning is an experience, right? It has a beginning, has an end, has a purpose, has a facilitator. So what is the difference? And we started doing this series through CapSource called the Experiential Educators, where we interview educators that kind of stand up and say, I'm an experiential educator, and here's what I mean by that. And at this point, we've interviewed dozens of different educators from all different topics and different areas of focus, teaching different levels of students. And we're seeing a whole lot of commonalities in their approaches. And also we're learning a great deal about just the breadth that is included in the term experiential learning. So CapSource has really aimed to codify the idea of experiential learning for some time now. And so our version of experiential learning is really industry integrated, project-based experiential learning. So to break it down, industry integrated is probably the most important part, what makes it different from a simulation, which is experiential learning, case studies, which are technically considered experiential learning. These particular projects that we help schools coordinate are involve a live industry third party who's involved in the learning process. So it revolves around their organization, real functions within the organization, whether that's the marketing department or operations or product development. It revolves around real challenges that have real stakes, and that actually encourages high levels of engagement, which results in what we see as the best learning experience for the students and the best outcomes for the organizations that host them. Project-based is all about framing these collaborations as a project. So rather than bringing students, educators, and companies into the same room, but through a site visit, we really go one layer deeper and say, hey, we're going to give you a prompt to work on and in order to really deliver results to your students. And at the end, we measure experiential learning as a few key aspects, one of which I think is the most critical is reference-worthy experience. So I think I showed this earlier in the presentation where we were delivering kind of the results of the live case competition, but this is our experiential learning framework. We take a lot of pride in this, and this is a living and breathing framework. This has changed a great deal. We tweaked the wording. We actually recently added the relevant tools and technical skills components, but to walk you through it, students use universal skills, which are essentially those soft skills that everyone always talks about are so hard to train. So communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity, in addition to relevant tools and technical skills. And that comes down to things like Microsoft Office, Qualtrics, Slack, Google Docs and Sheets. All of those different, collaboration, communication, and information processing tools that allow students to succeed and also allows them to, lay claim on their resume, hey, I've used this tool to solve a real problem. The second crucial part is that they're developing real outcomes. And real outcomes is actually, it's based on the premise that there's a real project with a real organization. So there has to be some valuable insights that the students are working on delivering to the stakeholders in the end for the real stakeholders who ultimately provide feedback. And so it's interactive, it's circular. And then the key, I think, to the entire experiential learning model and how we actually define experiential learning is it has to leave students with reference-worthy outcomes. So we'll get into that in a few minutes and show you some examples, but reference-worthy experience comes down to something that can be added to LinkedIn, the resume, or talked about during interviews. And what that really comes down to for us is it has to be attributable to a real organization. Simulations are not attributable to anything other than the fact that it was a simulation. And it's hard for students to frame that as something that they learned from other than trying to unpack it like you would traditionally do during a debrief. And so that's why we stand strong on the fact that there has to be some real world aspect to it and not just a learning scenario that's turned into reference-worthy experience, but someone somewhere can actually speak to the learning experience from the receiving end as a host organization. In addition, it really has to revolve around some real function within the organization that had a real challenge and that those have real stakes. And when that all comes together, it's a really powerful piece of experience that the students can reflect on and use to propel themselves forward in their career. So one of our most used formats, we have 4 formats. I'm only going to go through a couple of them today, our 2 most commonly used, but one is the capstone project. And a capstone project is a group of students working with a company with an educator as a mentor. And so it's actually slightly different than a facilitator because notice that the educator is not in the middle of the framework. It's actually off to the side. And they're really a guide on the side in this scenario because the students, with the ratio of 4 to 6 to 1 company, really it's a manageable relationship that the students can use as a way to interact with those host organizations and develop a relationship and some even potentially a professional reference. So an example of how this comes to fruition, this is the University of Notre Dame's MBA programs who do 1 week on-site immersive project-based experiential learning engagements. And obviously the 1 week quick turnaround is a very unique model. Most of the time we recommend at least 7 to 8 weeks because it takes usually 2 to 3 weeks for students to really get up to speed, especially if they're enrolled in other classes. The exception here is that the students are actually not enrolled in other classes and they do this as quote-unquote interterm, which is in between different modules in their MBA. They get to go in the field and apply what they've learned. And so in this scenario, the students have actually worked on developing a growth strategy for the company based on where they should enter from a regional and target market perspective. So what they do with this, so this is actually a separate example, but it's very cool to see how this student Brandon, who worked at Verizon on a similar capstone project, took the exact description of the project and turned it into his LinkedIn experience. So now he has something to add to the resume. He's got something to talk about during interviews, and it's a meaningful piece of learning that he can reflect on all throughout his career, working as a team, developing valuable skills and experience, solving real challenges for real stakeholders. So the second model that's most used by our clients is this live case model. And so this is really the notion about, can experiential learning be scalable? Scalable experiential learning means, can you take one company and spread it to many more students? Sorry that my screen is glitching out here, but so can you take that one experience and spread it over many more students? Notice the students are no longer in the middle of the learning experience. The educators are in the middle of the learning experience. And so an educator now becomes less of a mentor and more of a facilitator. And a facilitator in this experience really plays a liaison role between the host organization and the students. And the neat thing here is that we've seen in some examples 160 students at Northern Illinois assigned to a specific project or series of projects with Burger King or other businesses in their local environment. Ted, if you don't mind, I'm getting a little feedback. I'm guessing somebody's mic may be on. If you could just double check that for me.
Yep, I just found it and I think you're good now.
Cool. So
Thanks.
The live case in general, for us, it's the same exact job as trying to find an individual company to work with a group of students, but now you're able to take that same learning experience and spread it across very many. Well, you guessed it, the live case competition is a live case, right? So we have an example here of the director of sales and marketing, Derek Muni, who worked with our students, actually help the students understand blockchain, their business model, and the company's pivot to move from a B2C to B2B. And the idea was the challenge for the students was how should they go to market? And this whole thing is built from a reference-worthy experience perspective as a resume builder. Because you reverse engineer, okay, we know that the company is going to be attributed to the results. We know that the students are developing skills by communicating, collaborating, thinking critically with each other in order to develop the results. I think in this case it was even cooler because it was virtual. So they actually had to deliver their entire presentation in a virtual format, which is something I never really had a chance to do until I was well into my career. And at the end, the students are walking away with reference-worthy experience. And in this case, the Oregon Tech team, this is actually a screenshot I took from one of the presentations that we just saw. This is the winning team. And they were able to come up with a very powerful strategy that was extremely thorough about how this company should go to market for their new B2B business model. But not only that, the students actually won an internship, which is an extremely powerful opportunity that comes out of this style of learning. If you really build curriculum for the resume, you're actually building the resume, right? You're not just building curriculum, you're actually building students' resumes. And if you start thinking of class more as an opportunity to build the resume and less as an opportunity to share what you know with students, but more of an opportunity for them to step up and learn themselves by doing, then this could be an extremely powerful and compelling experience for them. But the truth of the matter is everybody who goes through these experiences is a winner in some way. And this is an example of how we've taken the entire learning experience and distilled it down to a badge, right? So you actually, if you break this down in the top left, you have attribution. So this is a real organization and a real point of reference that anybody who works with this particular student in the future can shoot an email to Derek and say, hey, we know that you worked with Tanner. What was his experience like in working on your project? Not only that, you have a specific idea of the topics related to the project, which I think is very powerful for students to be able to showcase that they have sales and business development experience or financial planning, data analytics, what have you. Then in addition to that, we provide a resource for folks outside of the network to learn more about us, about the project, and about the company that hosted them. This is actually an example of how Tanner took his last certificate from winning our open case competition this past winter and shared it with his network. and basically frame this as an incredible learning experience that he got a chance to go through. So if you think about building the experiences for something that a student can take a picture of as a moment in time and share it on their LinkedIn, that's where I think the end goal would be if you're building a curriculum that really focuses on professional development and reference-worthy experience. So to quickly talk about how we plan to coordinate millions of these with your help, we really ultimately partner with institutions and let them build their own programs, except we're here as kind of the piping and back end and infrastructure. So what we mean by that, we've had the good fortune of working with a lot of IACBE schools, especially through the live case competitions, reaching over 50 institutions since we started in 2017, hundreds of companies, thousands of students and educators being a part of the learning process for these students. It's extremely, we're very proud of our progress, and for us, we just see this as an opportunity to continue growing. What we've launched recently is our white label Connect platform. And so what that is an opportunity for schools to take ownership over their experiential learning sourcing and design process. We know that it comes down to finding the right organizations to build the right fit projects given very narrow teaching goals and timeline constraints. Hey, we need a project that runs the first week of January because the students are often on winter session. We need a full semester data analytics project and it needs to be with a company in our region. Or now what we're seeing is University of Richmond is looking for 3 projects in Peru because their international travel program got canceled, and now the students still want to learn about Latin American business culture and business models. And so what we do is we ultimately help the schools formalize their relationships with the organizations. It could be any organization of any size, of any type. About a third to a half of our projects are with nonprofits. So if that's of interest, to certain schools that are very impact focused, that's not a problem. And then we produce well-defined collaborations which outline the goals and objectives, and from an accreditor standpoint, they enable you to very narrowly prove, hey, this is what we planned the students to do and learn, and here, by the way, is what they delivered and how we prove that they were able to learn these things. In addition to the platform, we offer sourcing of the companies, the design of the projects. In addition to faculty training, you may have seen the Effectiveness Institute being shared through the IACBE network, but it's very narrowly defined training for experiential learning programs that involve industry. We also produce a lot of video marketing content for our clients to kind of showcase what's really happening behind the scenes with these student learning experiences. And we've partnered with International Study Programs, which is another supporter of IACBE, to provide logistics if travel is necessary. I know these days it's not, but hopefully in the near future it will become again. So we really hope that you're eager to partner with us to solve the skills gap together. This has been an incredible journey for us to bring students, companies, and educators together through meaningful collaboration, and we encourage you to follow us on our journey and to really be a part of the CapSource model. Just a couple of quick announcements. So you can, of course, connect with us directly by shooting us an email or visiting our website, clicking book a free demo, and you can schedule 30 minutes with me directly. Other than that, we actually just launched a brand new product called Open Cases. I mentioned this earlier, but we took the original project that the students just worked on through the live case competition and made it into an entire open case that could be used very similar to a Harvard Business Publishing or Darden or Ivy case study, except it's open-ended and it evolves, right? Just like as the businesses do. So, it's a totally different teaching and learning perspective, but at the end of the day, it's a really rewarding opportunity for students to be able to, really build their resume and show that they can deliver outcomes to a real organization, even if that organization is not actively involved in the learning process. And so that's the key distinction between the open cases and our live cases and capstones, is that the open cases don't have any collaboration with the industry. We're taking old projects and repurposing them as case studies. But if you do really want that premium experience, we can absolutely connect you with the right organizations and build the right projects. So with that, I'll say thank you for the opportunity to help your students build their resume and ultimately curriculum that will improve their professional pursuits. and we really look forward to accepting any questions with the last couple minutes that we have left.